Humanity's greatest revolution was not created by machines, armies, or computers. It began with a seed. Around 12,000 years ago, humans made a decision that would permanently change the course of history. They stopped moving. They began planting crops, domesticating animals, and building permanent settlements. It seemed like a simple improvement, but this single transformation created cities, governments, writing, money, organized warfare, social classes, and eventually the modern world itself. The strange truth is that the agricultural revolution gave humanity incredible power, while also creating many of the problems we still struggle with today. So how did farming transform a species of wandering hunters into the builders of civilizations? And why did the decision to grow our own food become the foundation of everything that followed? For most of human history, civilization did not exist. Humans lived as hunter-gatherers, moving through landscapes in small groups, following seasonal patterns of animals, plants, and water sources. This way of life lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. Early humans were not primitive in the way they are sometimes portrayed. Archaeological discoveries reveal complex social relationships, sophisticated tools, symbolic art, long-distance trade networks, and deep knowledge of their environment. But hunter-gatherer societies had one fundamental limitation. They depended on nature's supply. Food availability changed with seasons. Populations remained relatively small because ecosystems could only support a limited number of people. Most groups had little need for permanent governments, large buildings, written records, or centralized institutions. Then, around the end of the last ice age, something extraordinary began happening. The Earth entered a warmer and more stable climatic period known as the Holocene. Across several regions of the world, humans began experimenting with controlling their food sources. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people began cultivating wild forms of wheat and barley. In China, communities developed agriculture based around rice and millet. In Mesoamerica, people gradually transformed wild grasses into maize. In the Andes, societies domesticated potatoes and other crops. In Africa, communities developed agricultural systems adapted to local environments. These changes did not happen overnight. The agricultural revolution was not a single invention created by one group of people. It was a long process of experimentation that occurred independently in different parts of the world. Humans were not simply discovering farming. They were redesigning their relationship with nature. And that decision would have consequences nobody could have predicted. The first agricultural societies emerged because farming offered a powerful advantage: more food. A single field of crops could produce far more calories from a small area than hunting and gathering could. This meant communities could support larger populations. Instead of following food across landscapes, people could remain near fields, rivers, and storage areas. Permanent settlements appeared. One of the earliest known examples is Jericho, where humans built structures thousands of years before the rise of the first major cities. At first, farming communities were relatively simple. Families planted crops, raised animals, stored food, and worked together. But surplus food created something revolutionary. For the first time in human history, some people could produce more food than they personally needed. That surplus changed society. A farmer could grow enough grain to support not only themselves, but also specialists who did not farm. Craftsmen could create tools. Builders could construct monuments. Soldiers could defend territories. Administrators could organize resources. Religious leaders could develop institutions. The foundation of complex society had been created. But agriculture did more than create settlements. It created the need for organization. When people live together in large numbers, new questions appear. Who controls resources? Who resolves conflicts? Who manages irrigation systems? Who protects stored food? Who makes decisions for thousands of people? The answer eventually became government. The first civilizations emerged in places where agriculture created enough surplus to support large populations. In Mesopotamia, farmers transformed the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers into one of the world's earliest urban civilizations. Cities such as Uruk became centers of trade, religion, administration, and political power. But managing these complex societies required something new: information. And this created one of humanity's most important inventions: writing. The earliest writing systems were not originally created for poetry or literature. They were created to count. How much grain entered a warehouse? How much was distributed? Who owed what? Agriculture created bureaucracy, and bureaucracy created writing. A technology designed to manage crops eventually became the foundation of recorded history. Agriculture also transformed human relationships with land. Before farming, territories were flexible. Groups moved across landscapes. But farmers depended on specific locations. A field planted today represented an investment in the future. People became attached to land. Property became important. Inheritance became important. Boundaries became important. And eventually, conflict over land became one of the most common causes of human warfare. The agricultural revolution did not create violence. Humans had conflicts long before farming. But agriculture changed the scale of conflict. A farming society could support larger populations, organized armies, and specialized warriors. States could collect resources and project power. This allowed the rise of kingdoms and empires. The same agricultural surplus that built temples and cities also helped build armies. But the agricultural revolution was not simply a story of progress. It also came with costs. For many early farmers, life became physically harder. Hunter-gatherers often had more varied diets and spent fewer hours obtaining food compared with many early agricultural communities. Farmers faced repetitive labor, crop failures, famine risks, and diseases that spread more easily in crowded settlements. Living closely with domesticated animals created opportunities for pathogens to jump from animals to humans. Smallpox, influenza, and other diseases have connections to this changing relationship between humans and animals. Agriculture increased human numbers, but it also created vulnerabilities. Humanity gained control over food production, yet by becoming dependent on a smaller number of crops, societies became more fragile. A failed harvest could destroy an entire community. The agricultural revolution was not just a technological change, it was a transformation of human systems. The most important shift was the creation of complexity. Hunter-gatherer societies were limited by immediate environmental resources. Agricultural societies could accumulate. They could store grain. They could collect taxes. They could build infrastructure. They could maintain institutions across generations. This created a completely different type of civilization. The modern world operates on this same principle. Almost every major institution today depends on surplus production. Governments require taxes. Companies require production. Cities require food networks. Military forces require economic support. Universities require resources produced elsewhere. The agricultural revolution created the economic foundation that made specialization possible. A society where everyone must hunt or grow food has limited room for scientists, engineers, artists, or administrators. But once agriculture creates surplus, humanity can divide labor into thousands of different roles. This division of labor became one of the greatest engines of human advancement. However, historians and anthropologists continue debating one important question: did agriculture improve human life? The traditional view sees farming as humanity's greatest achievement. It created civilization, technology, and population growth. But some researchers argue that agriculture also created inequality and suffering. When societies accumulated wealth, they also accumulated differences in power. Some people controlled land, others worked it. Social hierarchies became stronger. The gap between elites and ordinary workers expanded. Agriculture allowed civilizations to grow larger than ever before, but it also created systems where power could become concentrated. This tension has existed throughout human history. The same systems that produce prosperity can also create inequality. Another important consequence was humanity's changing relationship with the environment. Before agriculture, humans adapted themselves to ecosystems. After agriculture, humans increasingly adapted ecosystems to themselves. Forests were cleared, rivers were controlled, animals were selectively bred, landscapes were transformed. Agriculture was the beginning of humanity becoming a planetary force. Thousands of years later, this process would contribute to industrialization, urbanization, and the modern environmental challenges facing the world today. In many ways, the agricultural revolution was the first step toward the Anthropocene, the era in which human activity became a dominant influence on Earth's systems.
The difference between hunter-gatherer societies and agricultural societies reveals a fascinating paradox. Agriculture created larger populations, technological progress, and organized civilization. But larger did not always mean better for every individual. A hunter-gatherer group might have had fewer possessions, but greater mobility and dietary diversity. An early farming community had more predictable food production, but faced harder labor and greater disease risks. The comparison is not about declaring one lifestyle superior. They represented different solutions to different challenges. Hunter-gatherers optimized for flexibility. Farmers optimized for stability and growth. The modern world exists because humanity chose the second path. But understanding the first reminds us that progress has always involved trade-offs. Every major transformation creates new opportunities and new problems.
Although the agricultural revolution is one of the best studied events in human history, many questions remain unanswered. Archaeologists continue debating why agriculture emerged when it did. Climate change after the Ice Age was likely important, but it was not the only factor. Population pressures, cultural changes, technological discoveries, and environmental conditions all probably played roles. Another uncertainty involves how intentional the transition was. Early humans were not suddenly deciding, "We will create civilization." The process was gradual. People experimented with plants and animals over generations. Small choices accumulated into a transformation that reshaped humanity. This is an important lesson in history. The biggest changes are not always created by single moments of invention. Sometimes they emerge from thousands of small decisions.
Today, agriculture remains the foundation of human civilization. More than 8 billion people depend on global food systems built upon principles that began thousands of years ago. But the agricultural revolution also created challenges that remain unresolved. Modern farming has increased food production dramatically. New technologies, improved crops, and advanced agricultural methods allowed humanity to feed billions more people than ancient societies could have imagined. Yet this success comes with costs. Industrial agriculture requires enormous amounts of land, water, and energy. Climate change threatens crop stability. Soil degradation affects long-term productivity. Biodiversity loss creates ecological risks. The same question that faced the first farmers still exists today. How do we produce enough food while maintaining the systems that allow life to continue? The future of agriculture may determine the future of civilization itself. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, vertical farming, and new agricultural technologies could transform food production again. In a sense, humanity is approaching another agricultural revolution. The first one changed us from hunter-gatherers into civilization builders. The next one may determine whether civilization can remain sustainable.
The agricultural revolution was not just the moment humans learned how to grow food. It was the moment humans began building a world beyond survival. From the first planted seeds came villages. From villages came cities. From cities came governments, economies, science, technology, and the interconnected world we live in today. But the story of agriculture is not simply a story of progress. It is a story of choices. Humanity gained incredible power by controlling nature, but that power created new responsibilities. The same revolution that gave us civilization also created challenges that continue thousands of years later. The question is not whether agriculture changed humanity. It clearly did. The deeper question is, now that humanity has transformed the planet, can we learn to manage the world we created? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more stories about the forces that shaped our world.